Hello, thank you for watching the Encoder channel where people can learn how to code. Today, we will be talking about user management. In order to use Linux, you have to be a somebody. You have to be a user. That's why it's important to understand how to create, modify, and delete users within Linux. This video will be dedicated specifically to just that. First, let's see how to view users on your Linux machine. The list of all the users in Linux can be found in the file etc password. So less password. See, there they all are. Each line in the field has 7 fields delimited by colons that contain the following information. And don't worry if you don't understand these fields. We'll go over them later in the video. Username, encrypted password. X means that the password is stored in the etc shadow file. User ID number, user group ID number, full name of the user, which we don't have, user home directory, login shell, defaults to the bin bash shell, login shell. We can look at the ncoder user as an example. Let's grep for encoder in the etc password file. First, I want to mention that I will be using the command sudo a lot in this video. I will cover for what sudo does for you later on, as it deals with the user privileges as well. But just know right now that is used to give me elevated privileges so I can see files I normally wouldn't be able to. Sudo grep encoder etc password. So what? It might be easier to see what is going on if we create a user. Let's do that now. So let's grep user 1. Let's grep user 1 in the etc password. See, there it is. As you can see, we now have a user with the name user1. Let's set the password for user1. Sudo password user1. I'm just going to do password. So you might have to type it twice. So we can now log into the computer user1. One thing that you will notice is that the entry in the etc password file does not contain the full name of the user. Let's recreate the user, but this time give the user a full name as well as change a few other things such as give it the user ID and group ID we want instead of having Linux auto-assign those values. Also, let's tell Linux where to create the user's home directory instead of having that auto-assigned as well. First, let's delete the user1 account. Sudo user delete -r user1, and it's deleted. Let's grep it. Grep user1 in the etc password file. You will notice I used -r in the user delete command. This is because the user add command doesn't just create the user, but also creates a home directory and a mailbox. Don't worry about those. Just know that I'm using the -r in the user delete command to get rid of the user account and associated mailbox and home directory. Now let's recreate the user1 account with the values we want. Sudo add user -d So we're going to sudo add user -d /home/user1 home directory -u 1005 -c, which means comment, learning add user command user1. So now let's grep it. Grep user1 in the etc password file. See, there it is. Exactly how we wanted it. You can see that it created a username, user1, an encrypted password, which is the X. The user ID is 1005. The group ID is 1005. The comment is the learning add user command. The home directory is the home user1 home directory. And then, of course, its default to login shell is bin bash. What's interesting here is I created a group ID for us. What the heck is a group and how is it used? A group in Linux is a collection of accounts that can be given special permissions on the system. Groups allow an administrator to group one or more users together, so all of those users belonging to that group have to follow a set of rules. For example, you could give one group the read permission on a file, and another group the write permission on the same file. When we create a user, Linux automatically creates a group for that user. A group for entry for that user. Basically, it's just saying that the user is grouped with itself. It's kind of silly, but it's useful because you can add other users to your group, which gives those users access to anything you can do. This is best explained by an example. Let's remove the user1 account again. Sudo user delete -r user1. Then let's create a group entry for the user1 user we are going to create. We don't need to do this step. But we are doing it only to make the point that you can set the group ID to what you want. It doesn't have to be auto-assigned. So sudo group add -g 1006 user1, which means we are adding a group with the group ID 1006 and putting user1 in it. Now let's grep sudo grep user1 in the etc passwd file. Now let's create the user as we did before, but tell Linux what group ID to use. So let's grep user1 and the etc password file. Now let's set the password for user1. I'm going to do password. I might have to enter it twice. Let's try to see what is inside of user1's home, inside of the user1 user's home directory as ourselves encoder. Let's list home user1 home directory. See, we can't open that directory because we don't have permission to do that. And as expected, we can't see inside that directory because we don't have access to that directory. That directory is owned by user1. Now let's add the encoder user to the user1 group. So we're going to exit, and that makes us go to the root. We go to root, and then user mod. You have to do this in the root, otherwise it won't work. -a -g user1 encoder. The flag -a means append, and -g means to the group. So this command is saying modify the group user by appending the user encoder to it. Let's see what that did. We also need to make sure that the user1 home directory is allowing group users to access its directory. So ls-l/home grep user1. So you pipe it grep user1 ls-l/home pipe grep user1. See? See, so it printed that stuff out. Now let's chmod 750. Chmod means change mode, but we'll talk about that later. So let's ls-l/home pipe it grep user1. We can see that the encoder user now belongs to the user1 group. Let's see if we, as the user encoder, can access user1's home directory. So su-encoder. So we just logged into the nightcoder account, and then let's ls-home user1 home directory. You can now see that we do not get the error permission denied as we did before. We can access user1's home directory. Let's try to write to user1's home directory. So touch/home slash user1 home directory slash test file. So we can't. That's because the user1's home directory doesn't allow its group users to write to the directory, only read. We'll leave that for another video. Let's briefly talk about sudo. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, sudo is used to give a user elevated privileges. Sudo stands for super user do, as in become a super user and do something just for that one command. We needed to use sudo to use the commands user add, user delete, user mod, etc. That's because only an administrator should have the right to do such important commands. Can you imagine if anyone could add, delete, or modify users on a Linux system? It would be chaos. So you give sudo only to those people that are trusted to issue such commands. Sudo is very powerful, but it can be very dangerous if the person using it does not know what they are doing. In this case, anyone belonging to the wheel group will have sudo access. Let's see what the wheel group does within the etc sudo words file. We can see who has sudo privileges by looking at the file etc group file and see which users belong to the wheel group. Grep encoder in the etc group. And that's it. We now know how to create users and groups, delete users, modify users, and how to sudo to access elevated privileges. That's all I have for today. Thanks for joining me on the Encoder.